Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. Top Republicans tonight taking direct aim at the corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice. House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes says both the DOJ and the FBI are withholding key documents on the discredited Trump dossier, and he is demanding an end to all the stonewalling. Our special guests tonight, two congressmen who've been instrumental in exposing the deep state. Congressman Ron DeSantis and Andy Biggs will be joining us. Also tonight, President Trump sending a warning to China after reports the country provided oil to North Korea violating international sanctions. Can China be trusted to crack down on Kim Jong-un's regime? We'll take that up. And new reports the president could kill the disastrous Iran nuclear deal as early as next month. We'll discuss the possible fallout with Fox News Middle East expert Dr. Waleed Phares. We begin tonight with our top story, corruption and collusion at the FBI. The national left-wing media has been aghast when Florida Congressman Francis Rooney called for a, quote, purge of politically biased officials at the nation's top law enforcement agency. But as Fox News correspondent Kevin Corke points out, they are already draining the swamp at the FBI.
In a letter obtained exclusively by Fox News, Chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Congressman Devin Nunes, excoriated the FBI and DOJ for failing to produce documents related to subpoenas issued over 4 months ago concerning the Trump dossier. Nunes telling Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, quote, at this point, it seems the DOJ and FBI need to be investigating themselves.
I would like to see the directors of those agencies purge it.
Florida Republican Congressman Francis Rooney was inescapably clear. He wants to see the FBI and Justice Department clean house.
We've got a lot of great agents, a lot of great lawyers here. Those are the people that I want the American people to see and know the good work's being done, not these people who are kind of the deep state.
Rooney, the latest to join the GOP chorus of attacks on the FBI and DOJ, including suggestions by some lawmakers that each has acted as tools of the so-called deep state, engaged in a de facto coup d'etat, are corrupt and, as Rooney put it, in need of a purge. President Trump's made no secret of his frustration at the Bureau's handling of both the Clinton and Russia investigations, unleashing a barrage of tweets, including one just 2 days ago suggesting that the Bureau had been, quote, tainted.
It's a shame what's happened with the FBI, but we're going to rebuild the FBI. It'll be bigger and better than ever.
Change is taking place. The FBI's General Counsel James Baker has been reassigned. Deputy Director Andrew McCabe expected to retire early next year. Agent Peter Strzok, who helped to run the Clinton server investigation, has been removed from the Russia probe after anti-Trump texts were discovered in correspondence with his alleged mistress and fellow agent Lisa Page. And former Associate Deputy AG Bruce Orr has been demoted at Justice for concealing meetings with Fusion GPS, the company behind the anti-Trump dossier.
The problem is in the swamp of Washington, D.C., the biggest alligator is a politicized FBI and Department of Justice. And that's why we're fighting hard to make sure that we've got a fair and equal opportunity for all sides to be heard.
But critics wonder if some of the changes, notably Baker's reassignment, are the result of mounting political pressure from the Trump White House and Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Former FBI Director Jim Comey tweeting, sadly, we're now at a point in our political life when anyone can be attacked for partisan gain. Credit to my colleague John Roberts for obtaining the letter that you saw there at the top of that piece. By the way, Greg, I think you'll find this important. We also heard today from Chairman Nunes, the DOJ and the FBI have until the 3rd of January. That's the date in which they have to produce all relevant documents and other materials related to the original subpoena from back in August. Again, that's January the 3rd, a date obviously we will be keeping a very close eye on. Greg?
Kevin Corke. Kevin, thanks very much. Joining me now to talk about it, Congressman Ron DeSantis, who's a member of several key committees, including Foreign Affairs, Judiciary, and Oversight, also a member of the Freedom Caucus. Congressman, great to have you with us here. Thank you.
Good evening.
So people may underestimate the impact of the dossier. It appears to have been used to launch the Trump investigation, then used apparently to spy on Trump associates through a FISA wiretap. Are you increasingly convinced by the evidence you've seen, or the lack thereof, that this dossier was completely fabricated?
Oh, well, look, I think that Andrew McCabe, the public reports of his testimony before the Congress, it was a closed session. He could not point to anything that had been verified by the FBI, but for the fact that one guy, Carter Page, traveled to Russia. That's not that big of a deal. And I think you're going to see this dossier when all is said and done. It was basically a pile of garbage compiled by the president's political opponents. And here's the thing I think that's really concerning. Nunes's letter, I think, lays it out very well. We've been asking for this stuff for months. And if the answers to these questions were, of course, the FBI didn't rely on the dossier, they knew that they didn't pay Steele, they didn't use it to get survey, you could have answered those questions in 5 minutes.
Right.
They fight, they fight, they fight. So to me, I think that the answers to those questions are not going to be comfortable for people both in the Bureau and in the Justice Department. When you look at guys like Bruce Orr, who was one of the right-hand men for Sally Yates in the Obama Justice Department, meeting with Christopher Steele during the election when all this was coming about. This thing just stinks to high heaven.
You referred to the Nunes letter, as Kevin Corke did. I've got a copy of it in front of me. It's clear from the letter that Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General, overseeing the Mueller investigation, has been stonewalling and defying lawful subpoenas from Congress to turn over documents. At some point in time, do you think that these folks need to be held in contempt of Congress, refer it to a federal judge for prosecution if necessary?
So I think that January 3rd deadline should be the last straw. And if they don't produce it, I think Congress needs to act. Doing a contempt. You know, we can do inherent contempt in Congress. That was done for 175 years. Hasn't been done recently, but I think the American people would support that. So absolutely, we need to get the answers to those questions. And I think there have been enough deadlines, and I think you have to act. We also we have an appropriations bill coming up the third week of January. There's nothing preventing us from putting restrictions on funding, you know, defunding Rosenstein's travel budget, doing things like that so that we're also biting back with the power of the purse.
You're a Harvard-trained lawyer. You were a prosecutor. You know that when people stonewall a lawful subpoena, they're covering up, aren't they? They're hiding wrongdoing in most cases.
I think that that's correct, but here's the thing, though, and this is really a test of Congress. People can get away with stonewalling Congress now because Congress doesn't exert itself. So there's a small band of us, like me, like Nunes, like Biggs. You know, we want Congress to flex its muscle here. If you're subpoenaed by the U.S. Congress and it's a lawful subpoena, you comply with it. If you're not complying with it, there's got to be consequences. It's time for us to show that we actually have teeth in Article 1. Right. We need to do it because the facts are important, but we really got to start getting these answers.
There's no evidence of Trump-Russian collusion, but there is evidence of Hillary Clinton-Russian collusion. Under the Federal Election Campaign Act, it is a violation of the law for a campaign to pay money to a foreign national to obtain information during the course of a political campaign. Isn't that what happened here? And why isn't a criminal investigation being undertaken of Hillary Clinton's campaign, the DNC, for paying off foreign nationals for the dossier and, if appropriate, criminal prosecutions?
Well, it's clear there was an effort to disguise what happened because if you remember, the Democrats and the Clintons, they didn't pay Fusion GPS or Christopher Steele directly. They sent it through this Perkins Coie law firm.
Yeah, sounds like money laundering. That's money laundering.
Perkins Coie. And you're not allowed to do that in campaigns. So they were the ones that paid Fusion GPS. So if you were just reading Hillary's campaign finance reports, you would have no idea that they paid for a dossier, that any money went to Christopher Steele or any of these other Russian people.
So in other words, they filed false financial reports in doing that, didn't they?
I think that they were definitely false reports. And the question is, why would you do that? I mean, it's dumb to do that if there's no reason. And I think the reason is that they were trying to camouflage the fact that this money was going to Steele and that Steele was having to pay some of these Russians in order to generate some of these fake allegations against Donald Trump.
Are you convinced, and we're almost out of time here, but that there was an effort by senior officials at the FBI and maybe the Department of Justice to absolve Hillary Clinton in the email case for political reasons, even in the face of incriminating evidence that she broke the law. And then they took it a step further to try to target Donald Trump as an insurance policy.
Well, there's no doubt that the way they handled Hillary's case is inexplicable. That is not the way the Justice Department or FBI handle cases. She did get special treatment. And then in terms of Trump, you know, the media doesn't like to talk about the Strzok text message. They like to say, oh, Strzok was anti-Trump. Well, yeah, we know that. We know a lot of Mueller's guys are anti-Trump. The text message about we can't let Trump win and you need an insurance policy, boy, I'll tell you, I don't know how you view that as anything other than something that's very, very damning for how this investigation was undertaken.
And it appears that Strzok had co-conspirators and not just Lisa Page, maybe Andrew McCabe, James Baker, James Rubicki, and maybe James Comey, a second special prosecutor, it seems to me, is in order to investigate them. They can't be trusted to investigate themselves. Congressman Ron DeSantis, thanks for being with us today. Hope you'll come back soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll be right back with much more. Stick around.
President Trump is confident that Republicans and Democrats will work together on a sweeping infrastructure plan for 2018.
Infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. We're going to have tremendous Democrat support on infrastructure, as you know.
The White House is set to unveil the $1 trillion proposal next month. We'll have a full report. And President Trump condemning China after the nation was caught red-handed selling oil illegally to North Korea. Whose side is China on? That story and much more coming next.
Welcome back. President Trump closing out the year with a major legislative win on taxes, but he is not going to be resting on his laurels. The president set to make a big push next month for his next agenda item, a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Fox News correspondent Ellison Barber has a report.
In an era where partisan divide defines the U.S. Congress, it's one of the few issues where, on the surface, it seems like Republicans and Democrats could find a sliver of agreement and make a deal.
Infrastructure is the easiest of all. We're very well on our way, so we'll be having that done pretty quickly.
And it's not just roads and bridges and potholes, which are in very bad shape, but we should have broadband across this country.
The process for rolling out long-awaited infrastructure reform legislation is set to begin next month when President Trump sits down with fellow GOP leaders in Congress.
The president has already invited Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan to Camp David the first weekend in January to make sure we're all on the same page about what our priorities are for 2018.
White House officials tell Fox News they are looking at about $200 billion in direct federal spending and easing environmental and labor regulations with the goal of stimulating $1 trillion in public works investment. But there is competing rhetoric within Trump's own party over whether this issue will be a priority in an election year.
What are we going to do in 2018? We're going to pick up where we left off and get back at reforming health care. We're going to get back at reforming these entitlements, and we're going to take on welfare reform.
Some fiscal conservatives are concerned about the cost of transportation reforms. To save taxpayer money, they favor more funding partnerships between the public and private sector. That means things like toll roads. As for Democrats, there's infighting there as well over whether to work with the president and his allies. Some remain frustrated over tax reform and, in their view, being left out of the negotiations, while some on the left are calling Trump out and at times taunting him for not moving faster on an election campaign promise.
No infrastructure bill. Where's that famous infrastructure bill that was going to be the first thing out of the gate?
Democrats have laid out their own competing $1 trillion bill. The money would come mostly from direct federal funding.
We are ready with a strong infrastructure bill that was put on the president's desk in January. We're still waiting to get feedback on that. It would create 15 million jobs.
Perhaps not much of a surprise, but money paying for a plan to rebuild roads and rails is the biggest hang-up, at least for now. Current offset proposals include increasing the federal gasoline tax and tax breaks to cities and the private sector to fund their own rebuilding projects. Greg?
Ellison Barber. Ellison, thanks. Alabama today officially certifying Doug Jones the winner of the state's special Senate election earlier this month. Jones defeating Roy Moore by about 22,000 votes, becoming the first Democrat to win an Alabama Senate seat in a quarter of a century. Moore had refused to concede the race and filed a last-minute lawsuit alleging that there were voting irregularities. The judge rejected those claims. Joining me now to talk about all of this, editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller News Foundation and author of The Art of the Donald, Christopher Bedford, and Washington Times columnist and Fox Business contributor, Tammy Bruce. Good to see you both. So, Tammy, infrastructure, Democrats love to spend money, so this it should be easy to get Democrat support, and yet they seem to oppose anything and everything Trump does.
Yeah, look, this is going to be interesting because they also want things, as we saw in that package, like national broadband. Well, you know what that's meant to do. Still in the FEC changed this, the FCC did, is they want broadband, as an example, to really be run by the government. That the larger it is, the more oversight that the government has, the bigger government is, and then, of course, with broadband or the internet, then that requires more government control. Those are the things that the Democrats are interested in. I also, and I think a lot of people will remember this seems like Obama did this, right? This was a big Obama push. And yet we saw a lot of signs.
Shovel-ready projects.
Shovel-ready jobs, those signs that were everywhere.
And then he joked that I guess it wasn't shovel-ready after all.
And so we're a little, I think we're a little burned in that regard. And we want to know exactly how this is going to work. But ultimately, the president should have, since the Democrats also want some of this, something that he really wants, so that as the negotiator and the businessman, so that he gets something that normally they would balk at completely, because everybody wants to go home in the midterms with something in their pockets.
Chris, what do you think?
I don't think he's got as much of a shot as everyone around town is saying he's got to get this through. He's going to have a nightmare with Republicans. The conservatives don't want to do this. The deficit hawks, who already had a difficulty with simply passing a tax cut, don't want to do this. Paul Ryan wants to focus on other things. And at the same time, you've got the Democrats who have no incentive at all to get along with Donald Trump, especially when they're coming up to a midterm. Do you think they're going to attack the environmentalists or attack the labor guys when they're trying to get back that labor vote?
Right.
Now, I don't think it's really an attack on labor guys to loosen some of these regulations, but that's the way they're going to view it, and they're not going to take that deal at all so Donald Trump can put his signature on something, which means he's preciously short on allies in either party.
Well, I think you're right about that. I want to hit topic number 2, Roy Moore, who has always pretended he respects the law but has nothing but contempt for the law, which is why he was twice kicked off the state Supreme Court. No surprise he tried to contest this thing.
Well, look, I mean, we're growing up right now in this last year of resistance movement, right? It's become a cottage industry to ignore what an election means, and it becomes activism in and of itself. The good news is, of course, is that you've got a dynamic where the gap in the winning was pretty significant, 21,000 votes or so, and he clearly had nowhere to stand. And in the meantime, Doug Jones has a good reason to want to cooperate with President Trump, because just like Scott Brown found out, you take an interesting seat that normally would never have been yours, and it's real hard to hang on to that. So this is going to change probably in 2020, but Doug Jones could become a better vote for Donald Trump than Susan Collins or Murkowski or Flake.
And, you know, Roy Moore is so unpredictable in so many different ways, not fit to sit.
But and he's out now.
Let me go, Chris, to topic number 3. And fake news is the subject, and here is a Donald Trump tweet. We should have a contest as to which of the networks plus CNN and not including Fox is the most dishonest, corrupt, and or distorted in its political coverage of your favorite president, me. They're all bad. Winner to receive the fake news trophy. In your judgment, who's the winner, CNN?
I think it's a hands-down call for CNN. And just on the way here, I tried to remember and write down just a few of the fake news stories we've had to deal with recently. One, they said that Donald Trump Jr. was collaborating with WikiLeaks. It was obvious. I got the date wrong. The Daily Caller exposed that. We had that they had a single source that Donald Trump would not confront Vladimir Putin about election meddling at the G20. Well, he did. A single source that said that Scaramucci was under investigation. Well, he wasn't. They had to walk back that Sessions had hidden his meetings with Russians as a U.S. senator. The FBI, it turned out, had said he didn't even need to do that. They said that Comey was going to testify that he had never told Trump he was not under investigation. False. They even screwed up a fake news story from the Oxford University that turned out had nothing to do with fake news and had to walk back. And the whole time, remember, they started this fake news thing, complaining to the Obama White House to try and censor more conservatives, and now they're acting like they're under attack. I think they definitely win this year's award.
Chris Bedford single-handedly gives the award of fake news to CNN.
A dishonorable mention, Brian Ross at ABC.
Oh, who can forget?
Yeah.
And he'll never forget.
Yeah.
And we won't let him forget, by the way. Chris Bedford, Tammy Bruce, thank you both for being with us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you have any confidence in Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to purge the Clinton colluders and deep state never-Trumpers from the FBI and the DOJ? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow up on Lou Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like him on Facebook. Follow him on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. Checking Wall Street stocks closing higher in light holiday trading. The Dow gaining 63 points, finished the record high for the 71st time this year. S&P up 5, NASDAQ gaining 11 points. Volume on the big board, 2.1 billion shares. Check your 401k. Aflac, the latest company to announce it will give employees additional benefits and boost investment in the country as a result of the big tax reform law. More than 24 companies have announced pay hikes, bonuses, additional investment as a result of the tax cuts. And a reminder, listen to Lou's reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Coming up next, President Trump today calling out China for illegally selling oil to North Korea. We'll take up the shocking violation of international sanctions next. Stay with us. President Trump today expressing his frustration with China following reports it is continuing to illegally sell oil to North Korea, notwithstanding tough new sanctions. The president tweeted, "Caught red-handed, very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go to North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korean problem if this continues to happen." On another subject, new reports today indicating President Trump may choose to kill the Iran deal as early as next month. The president facing 2 critical deadlines next year. First, he'll decide if he wants to recertify the agreement by January 11. Then he must choose in mid-January whether to reinstate sanctions against Iran. Let's talk about all of this now with Fox News Middle East and terrorism expert Dr. Waleed Phares. Dr. Phares, great to see you as always. The president should not be surprised at China's behavior. They have long sought to undermine sanctions against North Korea, right?
Absolutely, he should not be surprised. Actually, we should not be surprised that he or the U.S. government are frustrated because of the Chinese behavior, but it has an explanation. On the one hand, China indeed, along with Russia and other members of the Security Council, have voted those sanctions against North Korea. That's a change from the past 8 years where nothing has really been done by the U.S. seriously. But on the other hand, China doesn't know exactly what is going to happen. That's why on the one hand they vote for sanctions. On the other hand, they keep sending those shipments to North Korea. What they need to understand, somebody needs to message them, is what is the next stage for North Korea? Will the next regime be close to China, neutral to China, continue to have business with China? This is the kind of discussions that should take place.
Let me switch now to the Iran deal. The president has an opportunity January 11th to kill the deal, the nuclear deal with Iran. Should he do so?
He can do so. In principle, he should change the entire U.S. policy towards Iran. The deal did not work. What is more dangerous than the deal right now is that Iran is building a fleet of missiles. And the large coalition that he's putting together, the U.S. is putting together against the Iranian missiles, has memberships of countries that would not support us against the deal. So France, for example, many members of the European community would be with us to stop Iran from acquiring those missiles, stopping Iran from shipping them to countries such as Yemen. We would have with us 40, 45 members of the Arab and Muslim community. So the president has many tools. But let me add one more thing that is related to things that are happening today. There are massive demonstrations in Iran today as we speak, yesterday and today in the eastern part. And that should influence what we can do over the next few weeks.
We know how the people there feel. Third subject is ISIS. The president has made great strides in destroying the caliphate. Got a couple of maps I want to show you. ISIS controlled territory in 2016 under President Obama. Fast forward to President Trump. And boy, there you really see the difference. And there's another graphic we want our viewers to take a look at, comparing the Trump administration's success versus the Obama administration's lack thereof. Note number 3 item. Total ISIS fighters has dropped now under President Trump from 35,000 during Obama's term to 1,000 ISIS fighters. Your assessment?
Greg, let's summarize it very simply. I mean, we had the same military from 2014, 15, 16, but we have a different political direction, a different strategy. I mean, between 14 and the end of 16, ISIS was all over the place in Syria and Iraq and even beyond that. In the last few months, ISIS has become skinnier. It's about to leave the scene. What has happened basically is a strategic decision made by this administration, and I think backed by Congress, to eliminate ISIS. And the reason for why the previous administration was not going fast, guess what? The Iran deal. Right. Many things have not gone so fast because of the Iran deal, and this is one of them.
It all comes back to Tehran, doesn't it? All right, Waleed Ferris.
Always.
Always great to see you. Thanks for being with us. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us.
More lawmakers are calling for the end of Robert Mueller's biased and partisan Russia witch hunt.
This Mueller investigation is just kind of spun out of control, and it's widespread and it's broad, and this may be the scandal of our time.
And the probe is expected to continue well into the new year. We'll take that up with Congressman Andy Biggs here next. And frigid temperatures and ice can't seem to stop these wakeboarders and their next ice adventure. We'll bring you the extraordinary video and much more straight ahead. Stay with us.
Welcome back. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee wants the Department of Justice to stop stonewalling the investigation of corruption and collusion at the DOJ and the FBI both. Republican Representative Devin Nunes sending a letter to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein once again, asking for documents and testimony related to the discredited Trump dossier, information he first sought more than 4 months ago during the summertime. Representative Nunes writes, unfortunately, the DOJ and FBI's intransigence with respect to the August 24th subpoenas is part of a broader pattern of behavior that can no longer be tolerated. My next guest wrote an op-ed in USA Today this week calling on Special Counsel Robert Mueller to end the Russia witch hunt. We're joined now by Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs, who's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, great to see you. In your well-written op-ed, you remind readers that James Comey's the guy who purposely leaked government documents to trigger the special counsel. I'll take it a step further and say there's now evidence that Comey played a direct role in the appointment of Robert Mueller by Rod Rosenstein. All three are thick as thieves, have been working together for years. Are you convinced that because of them and their partisan bias, that this is now an illegitimate investigation of President Trump?
Yes, I am. We first called on Mueller to step down 6 months ago in June, because we had indicia that this had happened. But now it is, as you said, there's no doubt here. Mr. Comey orchestrated this thing with his former protege, Rod Rosenstein, and to get his mentor, Robert Mueller, appointed as special counsel. This special counsel investigation probably would never have unfolded but for the fact that Mr. Comey, when he was director of the FBI, gathered some evidence. He wrote a memo, and then when he was going on his way out, he leaked it to a buddy who he knew would get it placed in the media. And thus we have this ridiculous, broad, overly broad investigation going now that was supposed to be on whether the Trump team, when he was a candidate, was conspiring with the Russians to affect our elections. We know that isn't true. Right. That didn't happen. Right. But now they're going way beyond this, and it becomes a witch hunt when you're abusing your power, and what this looks like very clearly. Speaking of
James Comey, as I read the law, it is a crime to convert government property to your own use and then leak it to somebody who's unauthorized. And especially if the documents that Comey allegedly took with him contain classified material. Shouldn't there be a criminal investigation of James Comey, and if he broke the law, he should be prosecuted?
Well, I don't disagree with that at all. I agree with it 100%. But here's your problem. The people who are number 2 in command at the DOJ is Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
And
he's pals with these guys.
He's pals with these guys. You had Andrew McCabe, who just is now finally being forced out, but he's going to retire with full benefits, etc. He was a big player on the FBI side. So you get this incestuous, this interlocking group of senior officials in our top law enforcement in the country, and you wonder why people are saying, hey, there's something wrong there. And there is something wrong there. And as you pointed out in the tease, Devin Nunes is saying, look, you've been stonewalling us. We want this information. Give it to us.
You smell a cover-up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely I do. I mean,
which is why Rosenstein has been stonewalling, right? He doesn't want to hand over evidence that might discredit not only himself, but the entire investigation.
Oh, absolutely. When we had them in the Judiciary Committee, I asked Rosenstein repeatedly for things. Everybody else in the committee did, and it was constantly, well, we're being, being investigated by the Inspector General, etc. They are doing everything they can to stonewall Congress and the American public on these investigations.
Right.
And I tell you what, the one thing that came out of that is both Director Wray and Attorney General Sessions agreed that if the Inspector General finds anomalies in the Hillary Clinton cover-up and the fake exoneration, which we already know exists, they both said they would reopen those investigations.
Do you think these people in the FBI, Comey, McCabe, Baker, maybe Rybicki, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, were all engaged in a plot to absolve Hillary Clinton for political reasons to clear her path to the presidency?
It sure looks that way. And that's why I think they're not giving us all the evidence that we asked for.
And that's obstruction of justice, isn't it, Congressman?
Well,
it's interference with the due administration of justice for a reason other than law and facts, but for political reasons. That's obstruction.
That is correct. And the fact is, Congress is trying to get that information, and they're stonewalling us. They're stoning us, and they're keeping us from getting that information, which prevents us from giving it over to. But who are we going to give it to? Sure. We don't prosecute it. It should go to the Department of Justice. So who's it going to go to? Rod Rosenstein.
Right. Isn't that exactly why you can't trust the DOJ to investigate themselves and their division called the FBI? This demands a second special counsel, somebody who is neutral, fair, and impartial to evaluate all of this and bring criminal charges where appropriate.
Absolutely. And you would need a better team than Mr. Mueller did, because Mr. Mueller's team, if you look at it, you couldn't have accidentally gotten such a biased team. I mean, that you just, randomly drawing, just saying, hey, this guy looks good, this lady looks good. These people all have an unfair bias in favor of Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump.
And why do you think he did that? One is tempted to say because Mueller decided before he even assembled the team that he was going to do his level best, notwithstanding the evidence, to try to bring down Donald Trump?
It sure looks that way. I mean, we don't have the evidence all put together because they're kind of stonewalling us. But, I mean, why else would you have Strzok and Page? Why else would you have half the team that's still there that needs to go? He needs to clean out. He's not going to clean out, so somebody's got to clean it out. Yeah. And basically, that's why I say they should just pull the plug. This investigation is so tainted, whatever they get out of it is not going to be credible.
And the taint is reinforced by the fact that last July, when Mueller first learned about Peter Strzok's anti-Trump text messages, he didn't go to Congress and tell them about it. Congress kept asking and asking, why did you dump Peter Strzok? And Mueller wouldn't say, and neither would Rosenstein. And doesn't that speak volumes that they were trying to hide something they knew would discredit what they were doing?
Oh, absolutely. I think that questions were starting to be asked about June, about what was going on. This is going on. They find out. They didn't find out through their own internal vetting process. They found out through the Inspector General. Right. They found out through FOIA requests. And then people are saying, well, they did the right thing. They've transferred.
Yeah. Well, how much damage did Peter Strzok and Lisa Page do before they were finally booted from the case? Congressman, we got to leave it at that. Congressman Biggs, thank you so much. Appreciate your editorial, your op-ed. We encourage people to read it.
Thank you, sir.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you have any confidence in Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to purge the Clinton colluders and deep state never-Trumpers from the FBI and the DOJ? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And roll the videotape. As always, you got to look at these wakeboarders taking their high-flying skills to a lake in Latvia. They perform incredible flips and jumps on an icy playground they created for this spectacular adventure. Coming up next, a new report detailing just how many immigrants are entering the country as President Trump works to overhaul our immigration system.
We will, very importantly, be funding and closing the loopholes that undermine our enforcement, and we will get rid of chain migration and the visa lottery program.
We're going to have a full report straight ahead. Stay with us. Welcome back. Immigration reform and border security have been a top priority for the Trump administration ever since day one. Unfortunately, Democratic obstruction has hampered the president's efforts to do more, but there's a new report out that could help bolster his argument. Fox News national correspondent William LaJeunesse has our report.
For decades now, U.S. immigration rules have been based on an outdated system.
A system the president wants to overhaul next year. A new report prepared by the conservative-leaning Center for Immigration Studies based on census data promises to help shape that debate.
Everybody wants to come to the United States, and quite frankly, the United States can be choosy about who it admits.
The report shows in 2016 an estimated 1.8 million legal and illegal immigrants settled in the U.S., the most ever in a single year, and 53% higher than just 5 years ago.
So the real debate now is, what should legal immigration look like? And I'll make you a prediction: in about 5 or 6 weeks, we're going to have to deal with that as you start to face the DACA expiration.
Reasons cited by the report for the jump in President Obama's last year: more guest workers and foreign students, virtually no interior or worksite enforcement, a surge in Central American women and children, and for the first time, spouses of visa holders were allowed to work, encouraging those still overseas to join new immigrants already here.
Family immigration has a huge multiplier effect. 70% of all immigrants, according to the White House, in the last decade have entered through family-based visas, and we're seeing the effects of it today.
This graph shows where immigrants are coming from. Comparing 2005 to 2015, Mexican immigration is cut in half, from 400 to under 200,000. Central Americans up by 100,000. Asian immigration almost doubled, and twice as many immigrants from Africa and the Middle East. From Europe, that immigration was flat.
What you really need to do is understand what is the undocumented population and how we fix that problem, and then reach over to those who are coming in legally and say, how do you maximize the benefit to your new home country, the United States?
The drop in Mexican immigration was dramatic. However, it also means the U.S. is deporting fewer Mexicans. Wednesday, the Mexican Interior Ministry said President Trump removed 26% fewer Mexicans than Obama in 2016.
So the report doesn't take a political position, but with the economy growing and the birth rate slowing, Congress may be more concerned about who emigrates to the U.S. than how many. Greg?
William LaJeunesse. William, thank you. Coming up next, is the United Nations rife with anti-Semitism? One of President Trump's spiritual advisors believes that's so. We'll be talking to Pastor Robert Jeffress coming up next. In our online poll, we asked you, do you believe President Obama's shadow presidency is an unprecedented effort to undermine the Trump administration overseas and should end immediately? 79% of you say yes. Guatemala is following President Trump's lead, moving its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Guatemala's foreign minister saying the Central American company faced no outside pressure to do this move. Well, joining me now is Robert Jeffress, who is pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas and a Fox News contributor. I hope you had a Merry Christmas, Pastor, and a forthcoming Happy New Year, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
You've penned an op-ed that says the United Nations is anti-Semitic, and I think history and facts are on your side. Explain.
All you have to do, Greg, is look at the facts. I mean, according to UN Watch, from 2012 to 2015, the UN issued 93 condemnations of individual nations. 87 of those condemnations were against Israel alone. And in just 2017, the UN voted against Israel 21 times. It only voted against North Korea, Russia, and Iran, only voted against them one time each. I mean, that is absurd. And I think it explains why it is the United Nations condemned Israel naming Jerusalem as its capital. When you think about it, they give every other nation the right to name their capital. Why not Israel? And I have to say, Greg, I applaud the president for having the courage to stand up against what has become a growing cesspool of racism and anti-Semitism.
Pastor, well said. As a political organ, the United States has long regarded the United Nations with skepticism, and I would call it a feckless organization. But let me move on to something else. The Archbishop of Canterbury and a UK bishop have both argued, they've criticized evangelicals for supporting President Trump. How do you make sense of that?
Well, it makes no sense whatsoever. Greg, a couple of weeks ago at two of the White House Christmas parties, the president was kind enough to ask me to close the evening with a few remarks and to pray. And I said at the time, no wonder evangelicals voted for this president by the largest margin in history and continue to support him. President Trump has become the most pro-life, pro-religious liberty, pro-conservative judiciary president in United States history. Why wouldn't evangelicals absolutely love him? And Greg, when you look at these bishops, what they really oppose is the president's immigration policy. They think it's unchristian to secure your borders and to protect your nation. Well, that's exactly what the Bible says government's responsibility is. Sure. God's the one who created boundaries. He said government is to protect its citizens against evildoers. Right. And you would think these bishops living in Britain would understand the need to protect your country against terrorism.
How unusual that the Church of England would be political. Pastor Robert Jeffress, great to see you. I mean that in the most facetious way. We'll leave it at that. Have a great night, everyone.